I'm Allison Parker, 36, and last year my life changed when I purchased a stunning Vermont estate after my divorce. As my first Thanksgiving as a single woman approached, I received a text from my sister-in-law Carol. "Sorry, Allison, it might be awkward if you join us this year since Jordan will be here with Brittany." Disinvited because my ex-husband was bringing his new girlfriend? I felt the sting of rejection wash over me, but it quickly transformed into determination. Little did they know, this rejection would lead to the most meaningful holiday of my life. Before I tell you how I turned this painful moment into something beautiful, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button for more stories about turning life's lemons into the sweetest lemonade. Growing up in a middle-class family in Massachusetts, I never imagined I'd one day own a multi-million-dollar estate. My parents, both high school teachers, raised me to value education above material possessions. I worked hard, earned scholarships, and eventually landed at MIT to study computer science. That's where I met Jordan. He was charismatic, ambitious, and studying business administration. We met during a campus mixer my sophomore year when he confidently approached me at the punch bowl. "That algorithm you presented in DR. Whitman's class was brilliant," he said, impressing me with the fact he'd attended a lecture outside his department just because he'd heard about the smart girl who challenged the professor. Our connection was immediate, both of us driven, both of us hungry to succeed. We dated throughout college, supporting each other through late-night study sessions and celebrating each other's victories. When he proposed the summer after graduation, it felt like the natural progression of our relationship. His parents welcomed me warmly, especially his brother Kevin and Kevin's wife Carol. We were young, in love, and ready to take on the world together. The first few years of marriage were blissful. We rented a small apartment in Boston as I began working for a tech startup and Jordan joined a financial services firm. Our careers were just beginning, but I quickly found my footing in the tech world. My analytical mind and innovative approaches to problem-solving caught the attention of my superiors, and I advanced quickly. Within 3 years, I was leading my own team. Jordan's career moved more slowly. While he was competent, he didn't stand out among his peers the way I did in my field. At first, he celebrated my successes, the promotions, the raises, the recognition. He bragged about his genius wife to friends and family. But as the years passed and the gap between our professional achievements widened, something changed. The comments began subtly. "Must be nice to get another raise while the rest of us are grinding away," or "I guess they just hand out promotions to women in tech these days." I tried to support him, offering to connect him with contacts in my network, but he refused, saying he didn't want charity from his wife. By our 7th anniversary, I had become a senior director at one of Boston's most successful tech firms, and our financial situation was comfortable enough that we purchased our first home, a beautiful colonial in a prestigious suburb. I paid for most of it, though we never explicitly discussed this fact. It hung between us, unspoken but ever-present. In our 10th year of marriage, I discovered Jordan had been having an affair with Brittany, a younger analyst at his firm. The betrayal cut deep, not just the infidelity, but the knowledge that while I'd been working late to secure our financial future, he'd been using our home to entertain her when I was away on business trips. The divorce was messy. Jordan claimed he deserved half of everything, including my stock options and bonuses, arguing he had supported my career by being an understanding husband. My lawyer, Diane, was brilliant and ensured the settlement was fair, but not without cost. I lost friends who took Jordan's side, believing his narrative that I was a cold, career-obsessed wife who had emasculated him. Most painfully, his family, people I had considered my own family for over a decade, sided completely with him despite his infidelity. His mother Margaret told me, "If you hadn't been so focused on your career, maybe you would have noticed your marriage was suffering." Kevin, my brother-in-law, was more sympathetic in private, but never stood up to his wife Carol, who had always been slightly competitive with me and now had the perfect excuse to exclude me. 9 months after the divorce was finalized, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I purchased a historic estate in Vermont, 5,800 square feet of stunning architecture nestled on 20 acres with breathtaking mountain views. The $2 million price tag raised eyebrows, but after years of saving and investing wisely, I could afford it comfortably. The real estate agent, Samantha, had shown me 15 properties before this one, but the moment I walked through the grand entryway with its sweeping staircase, I knew this would be my sanctuary. The house needed work. The previous owners had maintained the historic charm, but neglected modern updates. I spent months renovating the kitchen with state-of-the-art appliances while preserving the original hardwood floors. The 5 bedrooms were each given their own personality: a writer's retreat with built-in bookshelves, a calming blue sanctuary for peaceful sleep, a bright yellow guest room that caught the morning sun. My favorite space became the sunroom overlooking the apple orchard, where I would drink my morning coffee and watch the seasons change. Throughout the renovation process, I tried to maintain connections with Jordan's family, especially my niece Emma and nephew Lucas. I sent them birthday gifts and messaged them regularly, despite Carol's increasingly cold responses to my attempts to arrange visits. The children were teenagers now. Emma was 16 and Lucas 14, and I missed watching them grow up. 2 months before Thanksgiving, I received a promotion to Chief Technology Officer at my company. It was a significant achievement, and the announcement made several industry publications. I knew Jordan had seen the news when he sent me a text that simply said, "Congratulations. I hope it makes you happy." The passive-aggressive subtext was clear. With my beautiful home finally renovated and my career at an all-time high, I had envisioned hosting Thanksgiving for the first time. The dining room could easily seat 20 people at the antique mahogany table I had carefully restored. The kitchen was a chef's dream with double ovens and a 6-burner gas range. I had even hired a local landscaper to create a stunning fall display for the front entrance, with heirloom pumpkins and cornstalks framing the historic blue door. I had it all, except the family I had once thought would be forever mine. Carol's text arrived on a Tuesday morning, just 9 days before Thanksgiving. I was in the middle of a video conference when my phone lit up with her message. "Sorry, Allison. It might be awkward if you join us this year since Jordan will be here with Brittany. I'm sure you understand. Maybe we can do Christmas instead? The kids miss you." I stared at those words throughout my entire meeting, barely registering what my colleagues were discussing. The professional mask I had perfected over years in the corporate world allowed me to nod and contribute appropriately, but inside, a storm was brewing. As soon as the meeting ended, I read the message again, analyzing every word. It might be awkward, not for her, certainly, but she was assuming it would be for me. "I'm sure you understand," a presumption that I would accept this exclusion without protest. "Maybe we can do Christmas instead?" An empty promise to soften the blow. "The kids miss you," the knife twist, reminding me of the relationships I was losing access to. I took 3 deep breaths before calling her, determined to remain calm and rational. Carol answered on the 4th ring, her voice overly bright. "Allison, I was just about to call you back." "I got your text," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I have to say, I'm surprised. We've been planning this for months." Carol sighed dramatically. "I know, and I feel terrible, but Jordan only confirmed yesterday that he's bringing Brittany, and you know how things have been between you two. I'm just trying to avoid any holiday drama." "Have you considered that by disinviting me, you're actually creating drama?" I asked. "Jordan is the one who had the affair. If anyone should feel awkward, it's him." "Well," she hesitated, "there's something else. Brittany is pregnant. They're going to announce it at Thanksgiving, and Kevin and I thought it might be too painful for you to be there for that." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Jordan and I had discussed having children, but he had always said he wasn't ready. Now, less than a year after our divorce, he was starting a family with someone else. "Did Jordan ask you to disinvite me?" I pressed. Her silence was answer enough. "He did, didn't he? And you agreed." My voice remained steady, but my free hand had curled into a fist. "He said it would be uncomfortable for everyone," Carol finally admitted. "Allison, try to see it from our perspective. This is a big moment for him, and my feelings don't matter. I finished for her. I've been part of this family for 12 years, Carol. I helped plan Emma's Sweet 16 last year. I was there when Lucas broke his arm skiing. Does none of that count anymore? Of course it counts, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. It's just one holiday. We'll figure something out for Christmas, I promise. After ending the call with Carol, I immediately phoned Kevin. He answered sheepishly, clearly aware of the situation. I'm sorry, Allison, he said before I could speak. I told Carol we should include you, but she was worried about keeping the peace. So you're just going along with it? I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. After everything we've been through as a family? Kevin sighed heavily. You know how Carol gets when she makes up her mind. And with Jordan being my brother. I thought I was family too, I said quietly. You are, he insisted, but we both knew his actions contradicted his words. The call with Kevin left me feeling even worse. Not only was I being excluded, but the one person who might have stood up for me had chosen the path of least resistance. That evening, I tried calling my parents, forgetting they were on a long-planned anniversary cruise in the Mediterranean with limited phone access. My father's voicemail greeted me, and I left a message trying to sound more composed than I felt. They had been looking forward to this trip for years, saving carefully for their 40th anniversary celebration. I couldn't bring myself to spoil it with my problems. My best friend Tanya called just as I was pouring myself a generous glass of Merlot. Tell me everything, she demanded when I answered. I saw your text, and I'm already furious on your behalf. For the next hour, I poured out the whole story while Tanya listened, occasionally interjecting with appropriately outraged comments. Her loyalty was exactly what I needed. That's absolutely unacceptable, she declared when I finished. Carol has always been intimidated by you, and this is her power play. And don't get me started on Jordan. Getting someone pregnant right after divorce is such a cliché. The worst part is feeling like I've lost my place in the family, I admitted. Emma and Lucas are growing up without me now. Have you tried reaching out to them directly? Tanya suggested. Carol monitors Emma's phone, and Lucas barely responds to texts from anyone over 30, I sighed. I send them messages, but I never know if they're actually receiving them. After talking with Tanya, I made the mistake of scrolling through social media. My feed was filled with friends' posts about Thanksgiving preparations. Turkeys being ordered, family recipes being discussed, matching pajamas being purchased for holiday photos. Each post felt like salt in my wound. Carol had already shared her Thanksgiving planning post, so grateful to be hosting the whole family this year. #blessed, #familiarize everything. The irony was bitter. Apparently, the whole family no longer included me. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned in my king-sized bed, the master bedroom suddenly feeling cavernous and empty. Around 3 a.m, I gave up and wandered downstairs to the kitchen. The moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the space I had designed for entertaining, the space where I had imagined creating new memories. Tears finally came as I sat alone at the kitchen island, surrounded by beautiful things but feeling utterly abandoned. I allowed myself this moment of weakness, this acknowledgement of pain. The rejection stung not just because of the holiday, but because it confirmed my fears, that the connections I had built over 12 years could be so easily severed, that I was expendable to people I had considered permanent fixtures in my life. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting my kitchen in soft pink light, I made a decision. I would not spend Thanksgiving feeling sorry for myself. I would not give Jordan, Brittany, or Carol the satisfaction of picturing me alone and miserable in my big, empty house. I was Allison Parker, the woman who had climbed to the top of her industry through intelligence and determination. I would approach this problem as I approached challenges at work, strategically and creatively. I stood up, washed my face, and walked into my spacious dining room. Looking at the elegant table with seating for 20, an idea began to form. If my former family didn't want me at their Thanksgiving, perhaps it was time to create a new tradition with people who would appreciate being included. The morning after my sleepless night, I took my coffee onto the front porch despite the November chill. The mountains were dusted with the first light snow of the season, and the air had that crisp, clean scent that always made me feel more clear-headed. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed my neighbor Frank retrieving his newspaper from his driveway. Frank was in his 70s, a retired English professor who had moved to Vermont after his wife passed away 5 years ago. We had developed a friendly rapport since I'd purchased my estate, occasionally sharing gardening tips or discussing books. "Good morning, Allison," he called, waving his newspaper. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I invited him up for coffee, and soon we were sitting in my kitchen while I prepared a fresh pot. "Any plans for Thanksgiving?" I asked casually, setting a mug in front of him. Frank shook his head. "Not this year. My daughter's family is visiting her in-laws in Arizona. I'll probably just heat up a turkey pot pie and watch the parade." His words resonated with my own situation, and suddenly I was sharing everything: the disinvitation, Jordan's new girlfriend, the pregnancy announcement. Frank listened attentively, his kind eyes conveying understanding without pity. "You know," he said thoughtfully after I finished, "when Margaret passed, holidays were the hardest. All those empty chairs. But the worst Thanksgiving was when I tried to pretend it wasn't happening, just worked straight through the day like it was any other Thursday. The second worst was when I accepted my colleague's invitation out of desperation and spent the day making awkward small talk with strangers." "So, what was the best one?" I asked. Frank smiled. "The year I volunteered at the community center. Being around others who were also missing someone or somewhere else, there was something honest about it. We weren't pretending everything was perfect. We were just grateful for the company." After Frank left, his words stayed with me. I looked up the local homeless shelter, wondering if they needed volunteers, only to learn they were already overbooked with helpers for Thanksgiving Day. "We actually have more volunteers than we can use on the holiday itself," explained the coordinator, Beth. "What we really need is help the rest of the year. But if you're looking to contribute on Thanksgiving, we have several families who won't fit in our dining room this year. We've been trying to find places that might host a few people." That conversation planted a seed. I spent the next hour researching Orphan Thanksgiving online, reading stories about people who created holiday gatherings for those without family nearby or those estranged from relatives. Some were small potluck dinners in studio apartments, others elaborate affairs in community spaces. With each story I read, my vision became clearer. I had a massive house with multiple living areas, a dining room that could seat 20, and a newly renovated gourmet kitchen. I had the financial resources to provide a beautiful meal. Most importantly, I had a genuine desire to create something meaningful from my disappointment. Before I could overthink it, I created a social media post. "Thanksgiving update, plans changed, and I now have a beautiful Vermont estate with nobody to share it with. If you're alone for the holiday, unable to travel to family, or simply looking for a warm, welcoming place to celebrate, I'm hosting an everyone's welcome dinner. Great food, no drama, new friends. Serious inquiries only, space for about 10 guests. Message for details. Hashtag found family Thanksgiving, hashtag Vermont hospitality." I included a tasteful photo of my dining room with its mountain view, careful not to make it look ostentatious, but appealing enough to show I was serious. After setting up a simple online form for people to provide basic information and any dietary restrictions, I published the post and tried not to obsess over whether anyone would respond. Within 3 hours, I had 5 inquiries. By nightfall, 15. When I woke up the next morning, the number had swelled to 32. The post had been shared in local community groups and even caught the attention of a small Vermont news site that featured it in their Good News section. I sat at my kitchen island, staring at the spreadsheet of respondents, feeling simultaneously overwhelmed and exhilarated. There were more people than I had anticipated, with backgrounds more diverse than I could have imagined. Nancy and Hank, a retired couple in their 70s whose adult son had died last year, making family holidays unbearable for them. Mike, Jessica, and Tyler, college students from the nearby university who couldn't afford flights home. Melissa, a single mother with 7-year-old twins who had recently moved to Vermont for a job opportunity and knew nobody locally. Daniel, a military veteran in his 30s who had served multiple tours overseas and was struggling to reconnect with civilian life. Several neighbors from the nearby town who were estranged from their families for various reasons. Ryan and Chris, a couple who had been disowned by their families when they came out. The Patel family, recent immigrants who wanted to experience an American Thanksgiving. As I reviewed the list, the magnitude of what I was undertaking began to sink in. This wasn't going to be a casual dinner party. It was becoming a significant event that would require careful planning and considerable resources. But for the first time since receiving Carol's text, I felt genuinely excited about Thanksgiving. I made a comprehensive shopping list, then drove to the local gourmet market, the farmer's market, and finally the wholesale club, filling my SUV with groceries. I purchased 3 20-pound turkeys, 20 pounds of potatoes, countless vegetables, dinner rolls, and ingredients for 8 different pies. The bill was substantial, but I reminded myself that I would have spent nearly as much flying home to my parents for Christmas. This felt like a much better investment. Back at home, I realized I had perhaps been overambitious. Cooking for 30-plus people, even in my spacious kitchen, would be challenging. After a moment of panic, I reached out to a local catering company that had been recommended when I first moved in. "You want full Thanksgiving dinner catering with just 5 days' notice?" Sophia, the owner, sounded skeptical when I called. "Not exactly," I explained my situation. "I've already purchased all the ingredients. I just need help with preparation and service. I'm willing to pay premium rates for the last-minute request." There was a pause before Sophia replied, "Actually, this sounds interesting. Most of our clients this time of year are corporate events with predictable menus. A home gathering with such a diverse guest list, that's the kind of cooking that reminds me why I started this business." We negotiated a reasonable fee for Sophia and 2 staff members to help prepare the food and assist with service. She would arrive early Thanksgiving morning to begin cooking, with her team joining later. With food arrangements settled, I turned my attention to the dining logistics. The main dining room could accommodate 20 at most, so I would need to create additional seating areas. I transformed the library into a second dining space with 2 folding tables I ordered online with rush delivery. The sunroom became a third dining area, more casual with cushioned wicker furniture where the college students could sit comfortably. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of preparations. I created personalized place cards for each guest, wanting everyone to feel specifically invited rather than generically welcomed. I ordered fall flower arrangements from the local florist and collected colorful leaves from my property to create natural centerpieces. I purchased board games, card decks, and conversation starter cards to help break the ice among strangers. On Wednesday afternoon, as I was hanging a Welcome to Thanksgiving banner across the front porch, my phone rang. It was Tanya. "My flight got canceled," she said without preamble. "All flights from Chicago are grounded because of an early winter storm. I'm on standby for tomorrow morning, but it doesn't look promising." Tanya had planned to fly in Wednesday night to help with final preparations before the Thursday gathering. Her absence would make things more challenging, but I assured her we would manage. "Just focus on getting here safely. Whenever that happens," I told her. "We'll save you plenty of food." That evening, as I made final adjustments to the seating chart, I received a text message that made my heart skip. It was from Emma, my niece. "Aunt Allison, Mom told us you're not coming tomorrow. She says it's complicated. I don't understand why adults make everything so difficult. Lucas and I miss you." With tears in my eyes, I carefully composed my response. "I miss you both too, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. I'm hosting my own Thanksgiving this year with new friends. I'll be thinking of you. Maybe we can video chat for a few minutes tomorrow if you have privacy." Emma's reply was quick. "I'd like that. Don't tell Mom I texted you." I went to bed that night feeling a complex mix of emotions, sadness for the family connections that were fraying, but genuine excitement for the new connections waiting to be formed. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized I hadn't thought about Jordan or his announcement for hours. My focus had shifted entirely to creating something meaningful from what had initially felt like rejection. Thanksgiving morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight glinting off the dusting of snow on the mountains. I awoke with butterflies in my stomach and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. My home was about to become a gathering place for strangers united only by their desire for connection on this holiday. I had no idea how it would unfold, but I was ready to find out. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a soft pink sunrise that gradually illuminated the frost-covered landscape. First turkey to a roasting pan. "You've done this before," she commented. "Only for much smaller groups," I admitted. "My mother taught me her brining technique years ago." Sophia and I fell into an easy rhythm, preparing vegetables for roasting, assembling casseroles, and setting up a mise en place for the dishes that would need last-minute attention. By 10 a.m., the house was filled with the aromas of roasting turkey, sautéed onions and celery for stuffing, and pumpkin pies baking in the second oven. At 11:30 a.m., Sophia's assistants arrived, followed almost immediately by my first guests. Nancy and Hank, the elderly couple who had lost their son, stood hesitantly on my front porch when I opened the door. Nancy clutched a small bouquet of dried flowers tied with a ribbon. "We weren't sure what to bring," she said nervously. "We used to be quite good at social gatherings, but it's been a difficult year." I took the flowers with genuine appreciation. "These are beautiful and they'll look perfect on the dessert table. Please come in and make yourselves comfortable." Nancy and Hank moved with the careful deliberation of people who had recently experienced grief, as though they were relearning how to navigate social spaces. I showed them to the living room where a fire crackled in the fireplace and offered them hot apple cider. "Your home is lovely," Hank commented, his eyes taking in the high ceilings and the mountain view through the large windows. "It reminds me of a bed and breakfast we visited for our 40th anniversary in New Hampshire." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time it was the college students, Mike, Jessica, and Tyler, bundled in colorful scarves and carrying a large shopping bag. "We brought alcohol," Mike announced with the directness of youth. "We didn't know what kind of wine goes with turkey, so we got one of everything." Jessica elbowed him. "What he means is, thank you so much for inviting us. We were prepared for ramen noodles in our dorm room today." I laughed and accepted their offering, directing them to hang their coats in the hall closet. They immediately gravitated toward the sunroom with its casual seating, Tyler already pulling out his phone to take pictures of the view. The next arrival was Melissa with her 7-year-old twins, a boy and girl with matching red hair and freckles. The children were shy at first, hiding behind their mother's legs, but when I mentioned I had set up a craft table in the corner of the family room where they could make Thanksgiving decorations, their eyes lit up. "That's so thoughtful," Melissa said, clearly relieved. "They've been cooped up in our apartment all week because of the cold, and they have a lot of energy to burn." Daniel, the military veteran, arrived precisely at noon, standing at attention on my porch as though reporting for duty. His handshake was firm, his "thank you for having me" formal. He had brought a bottle of bourbon for after the meal, if that's appropriate, and offered to help with any heavy lifting or logistical support needed. Over the next hour, the remaining guests trickled in, 5 neighbors from the nearby town who arrived together, carpooling in an SUV. Ryan and Chris, the LGBTQ+ couple, who brought a traditional apple pie and their small dog Winston, after checking if pets were welcome, and the Patel family, parents, and 2 teenage children, who presented me with a beautiful homemade cranberry chutney that Mrs. Patel explained was American cranberry sauce with Indian spices. Frank, my elderly neighbor, was the last to arrive, walking slowly up the driveway with his black Labrador, Scout, and balancing a homemade apple pie in one hand. I rushed out to help him, touched that he had baked for the occasion. "I may be old, but I'm not completely helpless," he protested good-naturedly as I took the pie. Though I will admit, Scout pulled a bit harder than usual on the leash when he smelled what's cooking in your kitchen. By 1 o'clock, my home was filled with the buzz of conversation, occasional laughter, and the continuous background symphony of cooking sounds from the kitchen. Initial interactions were predictably awkward. Strangers making tentative small talk, searching for common ground beyond their shared lack of other Thanksgiving plans. I moved between groups, introducing people with potential shared interests, refilling drinks, and encouraging mingling. The twins had overcome their shyness and were proudly showing their paper turkey creations to Nancy, who responded with the practiced enthusiasm of a former elementary school teacher. Daniel had found common ground with Hank discussing fishing spots in Vermont. The college students were engaged in an animated conversation with Ryan and Chris about a television series they all followed. Just as I was about to announce that appetizers would be served soon, my phone vibrated with a FaceTime call from Emma. I slipped into my study for privacy and answered immediately. Aunt Allison. Emma's face appeared on screen, with Lucas peering over her shoulder. They were clearly hiding in a bathroom, speaking in hushed tones. We only have a minute. Mom thinks we're washing up before dinner. It's so good to see you both, I said, fighting back unexpected tears. How are you doing? It's weird here, Lucas blurted out. Dad keeps trying to make everyone act normal, but it's not normal. His girlfriend talks really loud and laughs at everything. Emma rolled her eyes. She's trying too hard. And Mom's stress cleaning everything while pretending she's fine. We miss you. I miss you too, I told them honestly. But I'm doing okay. I have a house full of guests right now, people who didn't have anywhere else to go for Thanksgiving. That's actually really cool, Emma said, sounding impressed. Way better than this awkward disaster. We have to go, Lucas whispered urgently. Someone's coming. Love you both. Call me anytime, I managed to say before the screen went black. I took a moment to compose myself before returning to my guests, unexpectedly emotional after seeing my niece and nephew. Despite the beautiful gathering taking shape in my home, there was still a hollow space where my relationship with them had been. As I rejoined the party, I noticed Sophia standing in the entrance to the kitchen, trying to catch my eye. Her expression told me something was wrong. What is it? I asked quietly, joining her in the kitchen doorway. My other assistant just called. He's stuck in traffic and won't make it. And we have 5 more dinner guests than we planned for. She gestured toward the front window, where a minivan was pulling into my driveway. Beth from the shelter just messaged that they have a family who showed up too late to get space at their Thanksgiving service. She remembered you had volunteered to help and took a chance we could accommodate them. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My perfectly orchestrated gathering was about to become considerably more complicated. I opened the front door to find a family of 5 standing uncertainly on my porch, parents who appeared to be in their early 30s and 3 children ranging from about 4 to 10 years old. The father held a grocery store pumpkin pie, while the mother clutched a worn canvas bag to her chest. All 5 wore expressions that mixed embarrassment, hope, and resignation. Hi, I'm James, and this is my wife Laura, the father introduced himself hesitantly. Beth from the community center gave us your address. She said you might have room for us at your Thanksgiving dinner? We understand if it's too last minute. The youngest child, a little girl with dark pigtails, looked up at me with wide eyes. We brought pie, she announced solemnly. Any hesitation I might have felt evaporated instantly. You're absolutely welcome, I assured them, stepping back to invite them inside. We have plenty of food and plenty of space. As I helped the family with their coats, Sophia approached me with a concerned expression. We'll need to rearrange the seating and stretch the side dishes, she whispered. It's manageable, but her words were cut off by a sudden, startling sound, the smoke detector blaring from the kitchen, followed by the distinctive pop of a power surge. In an instant, the lights went out, plunging the interior rooms of the house into semi-darkness. What just happened? I asked, more to myself than anyone else. Daniel, the veteran, was already moving toward the kitchen. Smells like an electrical issue, he called over his shoulder. You might want to check your circuit breaker. I hurried after him, finding the kitchen filled with a thin haze of smoke. One of Sophia's assistants stood frozen beside the oven, a half-cooked turkey on the floor in front of her. I was transferring it to the second oven when the power went out, she explained shakily. I dropped it when the lights died. Sophia was already on her knees, assessing the fallen turkey. It's salvageable, she announced. The foil protected it from the floor. But we need power to continue cooking. I grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and made my way to the utility room, where I found the circuit breaker panel. Several switches had flipped. When I attempted to reset them, they immediately snapped back to the off position. "That's not good," Frank said from behind me, having followed with his own flashlight. "Sounds like you might have a serious electrical problem." Returning to the increasingly chaotic kitchen, I found Sophia organizing an impromptu crisis response. "We have one turkey fully cooked and sliced," she was explaining to her staff. "The second is 3/4 done and can be finished on the gas grill if necessary. The third is the one that fell, which we'll need to thoroughly clean and cook somehow." The gravity of the situation was sinking in. I had 35 people in my home, a partially prepared Thanksgiving dinner, and no electricity. Through the windows, I could see snow beginning to fall heavily, much earlier and more intensely than the forecast had predicted. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" I called, stepping into the main living room where most guests had gathered, drawn by the commotion. "We're experiencing a power outage. I'm going to call the electric company, but in the meantime, we have flashlights and candles. This house has a backup generator, but it appears to be malfunctioning." The faces looking back at me showed varying degrees of concern, but no one seemed panicked. Daniel stepped forward. "I worked as an electrician before and after my military service," he offered. "I'd be happy to take a look at your generator. And I have some tools in my truck that might help." "I was a contractor for 30 years, added Hank, Nancy's husband. "I can assist if needed." Their willingness to help steadied me. "Thank you both. The generator is in the shed behind the garage." As Daniel and Hank donned coats and headed outside, I organized the remaining guests into task groups. The college students were assigned to collect all available candles and set them up safely throughout the house. Nancy and several of the neighbors began moving food from the electric refrigerator to coolers that could be placed on the snow-covered porch. Melissa and her twins were put in charge of gathering extra blankets from the linen closets in case the house began to cool without heat. Just as these efforts were underway, a sharp cracking sound came from the kitchen, followed by a splash and Sophia's surprised shout. I rushed to find water pouring from beneath the sink cabinet, rapidly spreading across the kitchen floor. "A pipe burst," Sophia explained, trying unsuccessfully to contain the water with dish towels. The temperature dropped so quickly when the heat went off. The situation was deteriorating by the minute. No electricity, a burst water pipe, snow intensifying outside, and a house full of hungry guests expecting a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. I felt a moment of pure panic, wondering if Carol's cold text message had somehow cursed my alternative Thanksgiving plans. Frank appeared at my side, calmly assessing the water situation. "You need to shut off the water main," he said. "It should be in the basement or possibly the utility room." "I know where it is," I replied, grateful for his steady presence. "But I don't know if I can turn it myself. It's an old valve." "I'll help," offered Ryan, rolling up his sleeves. "I deal with stubborn equipment at the hospital all the time." As Ryan and I headed toward the basement stairs, the doorbell rang yet again. Who else could possibly be arriving? I wondered, diverting to answer it. Standing on the porch, covered in fresh snow, was a plumber in overalls. "Frank called me," he explained, stomping snow from his boots. "I'm Joe. Live just down the road from him. Said you've got a pipe emergency?" The coincidence seemed too perfect to be true. "You're working on Thanksgiving?" I asked incredulously. Joe shrugged. "My wife and kids are at her mother's in Burlington. I was just watching football alone. Besides, Frank's a good neighbor. Helped me out plenty of times." I could have hugged him. Instead, I quickly led him to the kitchen where the water situation was worsening. As Joe tackled the burst pipe, my phone rang. It was Tanya. "I'm at the airport," she shouted over background noise. "They found me a seat on the last flight out before they closed the runways. I'll be there in about 3 hours, weather permitting. How's everything going?" I laughed somewhat hysterically. "Oh, just a small power outage, burst water pipe, and 5 extra guests. Nothing we can't handle. Hang in there," she encouraged. "I'm bringing reinforcements, extra food, wine, and my portable phone charger with a full battery. As I ended the call with Tanya, Daniel and Hank returned from their expedition to the generator, both looking grim. "The good news is we know what's wrong," Daniel reported. "The bad news is the control board is fried. No way to fix it today." But, Hank added, "We found something else that might help. You have a large wood-burning fireplace in the main living room and another in the library. If we can get those going strong, we can at least keep those rooms warm." I nodded gratefully. "There's plenty of seasoned firewood stacked on the side porch." "And what about cooking? Any ideas?" Daniel thought for a moment. "The gas grill outside for the turkey. The fireplace could handle pots for sides. And..." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small camping stove. "I always keep emergency equipment in my truck. This can handle a couple of dishes." With renewed determination, we reorganized our approach. The living room and library became our base of operations, with furniture pushed back to create a communal space centered around the fireplaces. Cooking responsibilities were reassigned based on our limited capabilities. Amidst this chaos, I noticed the Patel family had quietly set up an assembly line in a corner of the dining room, using candles to warm what looked like modified cooking vessels. "We are accustomed to cooking during power outages in our village back home," Mr. Patel explained when I approached. "Mrs. Patel has adapted her mother's methods for your American dishes." "Indeed, Mrs. Patel was expertly managing to cook cranberry sauce using a system involving candles and a small metal apparatus they had apparently brought with them. Their teenage children were preparing vegetables with practiced efficiency. The college students returned from their candle hunt with not only every candle from my house, but also several battery-powered lanterns. "We found these in your emergency kit in the garage," Tyler explained. "Hope it's okay we borrowed them." Melissa's twins, initially frightened by the power outage, had been transformed by Nancy into official light managers, solemnly responsible for ensuring each room had adequate illumination. Their faces glowed with pride at their important responsibility. As the afternoon progressed, what had begun as a crisis evolved into something unexpected. The shared challenge had broken down the initial awkwardness between guests. People who had been strangers hours before were now working together with the easy coordination of old friends. Joe the plumber successfully stopped the water leak and was now helping Daniel rig a heating system using the fireplace. The kitchen team, led by Sophia, had adapted to cooking without electricity with remarkable creativity. Ryan and Chris had taken charge of table arrangements, consolidating our original 3 dining areas into one large communal space in the living room where the fireplace provided both warmth and light. Frank, who had disappeared briefly, returned with 3 neighbors I hadn't met before, all carrying additional folding chairs and camp stoves. "Hope you don't mind," he said. "Word spread about your power situation. The neighborhood wants to help." Just as we were finalizing our revised dinner plans, the front door burst open, admitting a snow-covered Tanya clutching several bags. "Made it," she announced triumphantly. Flight was diverted to a smaller airport, and I had to hire a local with a snowmobile for the last 5 miles, but I'm here. And I brought reinforcements. From her bags, she produced battery-powered string lights, more candles, several bottles of wine, and containers of pre-made side dishes she had somehow acquired during her journey. The airport restaurants were closing and giving away their Thanksgiving prep, she explained, hanging her snow-drenched coat by the fire. "I convinced the manager at Chelsea's Kitchen to donate to our cause." Looking around at the bustling activity, the warm glow of candlelight, and the faces of people who had come together to overcome shared challenges, I felt a sudden, unexpected surge of emotion. This improvised gathering in crisis bore little resemblance to the perfectly orchestrated event I had planned, yet somehow it felt more genuine, more meaningful. As if reading my thoughts, Frank appeared at my side, handing me a glass of wine. "Not quite what you envisioned for your first Thanksgiving in Vermont," he observed. I took a sip and smiled. "No," I agreed, watching as Melissa's twins carefully placed candles on the now consolidated dining table, supervised by Nancy. "It's turning out to be something much better." As darkness fell outside, transforming the snowstorm into a canvas of swirling white against the black night, the interior of my home took on a magical quality. Dozens of candles and battery-powered lights created pools of golden illumination throughout the main living areas. The crackling fires in both fireplaces cast dancing shadows on the walls and radiated welcome heat that kept the November chill at bay. The dining tables had been rearranged into one long, continuous setup that stretched from the living room through the wide doorway into the library. White tablecloths were complemented by the fall-colored napkins, creating a visual continuity despite the mismatched tables and chairs. The centerpieces of pine cones, candles, and fall leaves looked even more enchanting in the firelight than they would have under electric lighting. "Dinner is ready," Sophia announced at precisely 5:30, appearing from the kitchen with a platter of beautifully sliced turkey. Behind her came a procession of helpers carrying dishes that represented our collective ingenuity: mashed potatoes kept warm in Dutch ovens beside the fire, green bean casserole finished on camp stoves, stuffing baked partially in the oven before the power failed and completed in covered pots near the flames. Mrs. Patel's cranberry chutney had been supplemented by her impromptu creation of spiced roasted vegetables using her candle-powered cooking apparatus. Daniel had managed to save the dropped turkey by finishing it on the gas grill, while the college students had taken charge of the gravy, whisking it continuously over portable burners to keep it from separating. Joe the plumber, who had stayed to help after fixing the pipe, had contributed his family's secret recipe for no-bake pumpkin mousse when it became clear that the pies wouldn't be properly baked. His concoction, served in individual cups and topped with crushed graham crackers, was arranged on a tray held proudly by Melissa's twins. As everyone found their places at the long table, place cards having been rearranged by Ryan and Chris to account for our consolidated seating, I stood at the head, momentarily overwhelmed by the scene before me. 35 faces looked back expectantly, illuminated by candlelight, expressions open and relaxed in a way they hadn't been when they first arrived. "Before we eat," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "I'd like to thank you all, not just for coming today, but for turning what could have been a disaster into something quite extraordinary. When I planned this gathering, I never imagined we'd end up cooking by firelight or melting snow for dishwater." This earned appreciative laughter. But I also never imagined how meaningful it would be to face those challenges together. I raised my wine glass. "To new friends and unexpected blessings." "To new friends," they echoed, glasses and cups rising around the table. As platters and bowls began circulating, the initial quiet focus on serving food gradually gave way to conversation. I found myself seated between Frank and Nancy, with Hank across from us. The relaxed intimacy created by our shared crisis management had dissolved the polite barriers that typically separate strangers at such gatherings. "I was thinking," Nancy said as she carefully cut her turkey, "this reminds me of Thanksgivings when I was a child in Maine. We lost power nearly every winter, and my mother always said those were her favorite holidays. When we all had to work together and couldn't retreat to separate rooms with televisions and telephones. We've forgotten how to navigate hardship together," Frank agreed. "There's something valuable in it." After the initial hunger had been satisfied and plates were being refilled more selectively, Daniel gently tapped his glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose something, if that's all right," he said, his military bearing softened by the candlelight. "In my family, we had a tradition of sharing something we're grateful for along with a story that shaped us. Would anyone mind if we did something similar?" No pressure to participate. The suggestion was met with murmurs of approval. Daniel nodded and continued. "I'll start, if that's okay." He took a deep breath. "I'm grateful to be here tonight because 3 years ago, I didn't think I'd see another Thanksgiving. My third tour in Afghanistan ended badly. IED explosion, 3 months in a military hospital, and a medical discharge." He gestured to his left leg. "Titanium from the knee down." But the physical recovery wasn't the hardest part. Coming home to a country that had continued without me, where people complained about trivial things while I was still seeing my buddies' faces in my dreams. I isolated myself, pushed everyone away. The table had gone completely quiet, all eyes on Daniel as he continued. Last Thanksgiving, I was alone in my apartment with a bottle of bourbon in a pretty dark place. My neighbor called the Veterans Crisis Line when she heard things breaking. That intervention saved my life. The counselor who responded that night invited me to her family's Thanksgiving the next day. I didn't go, wasn't ready. But this year, when I saw Allison's post, something told me it was time to try again. He raised his glass. So I'm grateful for second chances and for the reminder that there's still good in the world worth fighting for. The silence that followed was profound, free of awkwardness, filled instead with collective recognition of shared humanity. Nancy was the first to speak next. "I'd like to share, if I may," she said softly. Her husband Hank reached for her hand as she began. "We lost our son Kevin last year. Brain aneurysm. No warning. He was 38, with a wife and 2 children." Her voice wavered but remained steady. "For almost a year now, we've been going through the motions of living. Our friends mean well, but they don't know what to say, so they say nothing. Our daughter-in-law moved to Arizona with the grandchildren to be near her parents, which we understand, but—" She squeezed Hank's hand. "The holidays were Kevin's favorite time. He always made the gravy, always carved the turkey, always made terrible jokes." Nancy paused, blinking back tears. "This is our first Thanksgiving without pretending for someone else's benefit. And sitting here in this beautiful candlelight with all of you who were strangers this morning, somehow it feels right. Grief isn't something to hide from, it's the price we pay for having loved deeply. I'm grateful we had our son for the time we did, and I'm grateful to be here with people who understand that life is complicated and messy and still worth celebrating." One by one, others began to share. Melissa spoke about her journey as a single mother after her husband abandoned the family, and how her twins had become her strength rather than a burden. Ryan and Chris recounted their experience being rejected by their families when they came out, and how they had built a chosen family of friends who accepted them completely. The Patel family, speaking in turns with the children translating occasionally for their mother, described their immigration journey from India and their determination to embrace American traditions while maintaining their cultural heritage. "This is our first real American Thanksgiving," their teenage daughter explained, "but we have been practicing gratitude in our prayers every day since arriving in this country. America has challenges, but also so much opportunity." Even the college students, initially shy about sharing among so many adults, eventually opened up. Jessica revealed that her parents' divorce had left family holidays fractured and tense, with each parent expecting her to choose sides. "Being here is actually more peaceful than either alternative," she admitted. The sharing continued around the table, stories of loss and resilience, disappointment and hope, failure and redemption. The meal stretched into its third hour, candles replaced as they burned down, wine bottles emptied and new ones opened. The initial disaster of power outage and burst pipes had created a space where authentic connection flourished, free from the carefully maintained facades that often characterize holiday gatherings. As apple pie and Joe's pumpkin mousse were being distributed for dessert, a commotion at the front door drew my attention. Kevin, my brother-in-law, stood in the entryway, snow dusting his coat and hair. Behind him were Emma and Lucas, their eyes wide as they took in the candlelit scene. "Sorry to interrupt," Kevin said sheepishly. "The kids wanted to see you and, well, things got a little tense at Carol's." He lowered his voice. Jordan's announcement didn't go as planned. His girlfriend got upset when someone asked about wedding plans, and it turned into a whole thing. The kids were miserable, so I offered to bring them here for dessert. "I hope that's okay." Emma rushed forward to hug me. "Your Thanksgiving looks way better than ours," she whispered. "Is that really a dog wearing a bandana?" She pointed to Winston, who had indeed been dressed in a small Thanksgiving-themed bandana by Ryan and Chris. "Come in, all of you," I said, motioning them inside. "There's plenty of food left, and we're just starting dessert." As Kevin, Emma, and Lucas shed their coats and were welcomed by my guests, the twins immediately gravitating toward Lucas, showing him their candle arrangements, my phone rang. It was a video call from my parents, finally with reliable internet connection on their cruise ship. Allison, honey. Happy Thanksgiving. My mother's face appeared on screen, my father leaning in beside her. We finally have good reception. How's your day going? I turned the phone to capture the candlelit gathering, the long table of newfound friends, my niece and nephew being introduced to everyone, the dogs sleeping contentedly by the fire. It's perfect, Mom, I told her truthfully. Not at all what I planned, but exactly what I needed. Later, as the evening progressed and my parents had been virtually introduced to all my guests, Ryan approached with his phone. We created a group chat, he explained, showing me the screen. We're calling it the Vermont family. Everyone's contact information is already added. We thought maybe this doesn't have to be just a one-time thing. Looking at the chat group, I felt a wave of emotion. The name, the Vermont family, captured perfectly what had unexpectedly formed in my home. Not a collection of refugees from other Thanksgivings, but a genuine community connected by shared experience and mutual support. As if to punctuate this realization, the lights suddenly flickered back on, drawing cheers and then, surprisingly, groans from around the room. Turn them off, called Jessica. It's better with the candles. Laughing, I flipped the switches, returning us to the intimate glow of firelight and candles. In the soft light, surrounded by new friends and family both chosen and biological, I silently acknowledged how thoroughly my initial disappointment had been transformed into something far more valuable than I could have imagined. The rejection that had felt so painful just days earlier now seemed almost irrelevant, not because it had stopped hurting, but because it had led me here, to this moment of authentic connection that no perfectly planned, power-enabled dinner could have created. The morning after Thanksgiving dawned bright and clear, sunlight glinting off fresh snow that blanketed the landscape. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a pristine winter wonderland and, thankfully, restored power throughout the house. I awoke to the gentle hum of the heating system and the distant sounds of quiet conversation from downstairs. Several guests had stayed overnight. Some by necessity due to the storm, others by choice as the evening had stretched into the early morning hours with no one eager to end the unexpected magic of the gathering. The college students had claimed the media room floor with sleeping bags, while Nancy and Hank took the guest room nearest the stairs due to Hank's arthritic knee. Daniel had insisted on sleeping on the couch to keep the fire going, though I suspected his military training made him more comfortable positioned near the home's entrance. The family that had arrived last minute, James, Laura, and their 3 children, had gratefully accepted the third-floor bedroom suite when it became clear the rural roads to their rental cabin remained impassable. I pulled on a warm sweater and made my way downstairs, where I found Daniel and Frank in the kitchen, already preparing coffee and a breakfast of French toast using bread that had been intended for stuffing. "Hope you don't mind," Frank said, sliding a perfect golden slice onto a plate. Seemed like the troops would need sustenance after yesterday's adventure. "The power came back around 3 a.m., Daniel reported. "I reset all your appliances and checked the generator. Your circuit breaker is functioning normally now, but you might want to have an electrician look at the whole system. Old houses like this can have quirky electrical issues." I accepted the coffee Frank offered, taking a grateful sip. "I can't thank you both enough for everything yesterday. You basically saved Thanksgiving." Frank waved away my thanks. "This was the most enjoyable holiday I've had in years. Margaret would have loved every minute of it." His mention of his late wife came naturally, without the shadow of grief that had been present when he first moved to Vermont. Over the next hour, the house gradually came to life as guests emerged from various rooms, drawn by the aroma of coffee and breakfast. The atmosphere was entirely different from the previous day's initial awkwardness. The shared crisis had forged connections that would normally take months to develop. Inside jokes had already formed, and people moved through my home with the comfortable familiarity of old friends. Melissa's twins had bonded completely with my niece and nephew. The 4 children huddled together at the kitchen island planning what appeared to be an elaborate snow fort construction. Kevin joined me by the coffee maker, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in months. "Carol called 3 times last night," he confided quietly. I turned off my phone after the first call. She needs to realize I'm serious about not letting her dictate family relationships anymore. He hesitated. I told her I wouldn't be coming to Christmas if you weren't explicitly invited, and neither would the kids. I was touched by his newfound assertiveness, but concerned about causing further family friction. Kevin, I appreciate that, but I don't want to create more problems. The problems were already there, he replied firmly. Yesterday made me see how much we've all been catering to Jordan's ego at the expense of actual family bonds. The kids adore you, and cutting you out was wrong. Period. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sophia, who had returned to help with cleanup despite my insistence that she take the day off. My family's having their Thanksgiving today, since I was working yesterday, she explained, already organizing the dishwasher loading with military precision. But I wanted to make sure everything was properly put away first. Professional pride. As the morning progressed, guests began reluctantly preparing to depart. Each goodbye felt significant, unlike the perfunctory farewells that typically end social gatherings. Nancy hugged me tightly, whispering, "You've given us our first holiday joy since losing Kevin. I can never thank you enough." Ryan and Chris exchanged contact information with nearly everyone, promising to host a holiday movie night at their apartment in December. Chosen family is still family, Chris said as they bundled Winston into his doggy sweater for the journey home. The college students left with containers of leftovers that would feed them for days, and Daniel departed with a standing invitation to use my woodshop in the detached garage whenever he wanted. His therapist had suggested woodworking as a meditative practice to help manage his PTSD. Even Joe the plumber had been folded into our impromptu community, leaving with Nancy's recipe for cranberry bread and a promise to check my pipes again before the next cold snap. By early afternoon, only Kevin and the children remained, reluctant to return to what Kevin described as the aftermath at Carol's house. We were playing a board game in the living room when my phone chimed with a text message from Carol herself. "Can we talk?" In person, it read simply. Kevin saw the message and raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," I replied. "But maybe it's time." Carol arrived 30 minutes later, visibly nervous as she stood on my porch. The children had been sworn to secrecy about her visit, hiding upstairs with a movie while Kevin remained in the living room, available if needed but giving us space to talk. "Your home is beautiful," Carol said as I led her into the kitchen, where we could speak privately. "I've never actually seen it before." "You've never asked to visit," I pointed out, keeping my tone neutral as I offered her tea. Carol accepted the mug, wrapping her hands around it as though seeking warmth, despite the now-functioning heating system. "I owe you an apology," she said after a long moment. "Several, actually." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I shouldn't have disinvited you from Thanksgiving, especially not by text. That was cowardly." She stared into her tea. "The truth is, I've always felt a bit intimidated by you, your career success, your confidence. When Jordan started dating Brittany, she and I just connected in a way you and I never did. She's more like me." "Less threatening," I suggested gently. Carol nodded, acknowledging the truth in my assessment. "When Jordan asked me to uninvite you, it was easier to go along with it than to stand up to him. But Kevin was right to be angry. Family shouldn't work that way." She looked up at me directly. "I am sorry, Allison." "Truly." "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Yesterday was a disaster," she admitted. "Brittany got upset when my mother asked about wedding plans, and it turned out she and Jordan haven't actually discussed marriage at all, despite the baby. They had a huge fight, Jordan stormed out, and Brittany spent 2 hours crying in my bathroom. When Kevin took the kids and left too." She shook her head. "I realized I'd helped create this mess by always taking Jordan's side, even when he was wrong." Our conversation continued for nearly an hour, moving from the kitchen to the living room where Kevin eventually joined us. There were no miraculous transformations or dramatic promises, but there was honest communication and a tentative path forward. Before Carol left, she asked hesitantly, "Would you consider joining us for Christmas Eve? The traditional family dinner." My mother specifically asked that I make sure you're included. I'd like that, I replied sincerely. After Kevin, Carol, and the children had gone, I found myself alone in my house for the first time in 24 hours. The silence felt strange after so much activity, but not as empty as I had feared. My phone buzzed consistently with messages from the newly formed group chat, photos of everyone's safe arrivals home. Thanks for the hospitality. Inside jokes about candle wax and fireplace cooking. Tanya, who had left early that morning to catch her rescheduled flight, sent a private message. You know what this means, right? You're stuck hosting every year now. They'll all come back. You've created a tradition. The thought didn't intimidate me as it might have just days earlier. Instead, I found myself already making mental notes about improvements for next year, more battery-powered lanterns, perhaps a backup generator service contract, definitely more vegetarian options. That evening, as I curled up in my window seat watching the sunset paint the snow-covered mountains in shades of pink and gold, my phone rang. It was Jordan. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. Allison, he began, his voice carrying the forced casualness he always adopted when uncomfortable. I heard you had quite the Thanksgiving adventure. News travels fast, I replied. Carol told me. Look, I just wanted to say. He hesitated. I'm sorry about how things worked out. With us and with Thanksgiving. I shouldn't have asked Carol to disinvite you. The apology surprised me, not because Jordan was incapable of apologizing, but because he rarely did so without agenda. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. Brittany's pregnancy wasn't planned, he continued, answering a question I hadn't asked. We're figuring things out. It's complicated. Life usually is, I responded, finding that the news no longer carried the sting it had just days ago. After ending the call, I realized I felt no desire to analyze the conversation or search for hidden meanings in Jordan's words. His life choices, his new relationship, these were no longer central to my story. They were merely adjacent chapters in a book I had finished reading. Over the following weeks, the connections formed during our improvised Thanksgiving gathering continued to deepen. Nancy and Hank began regularly babysitting Melissa's twins, giving her much-needed time for self-care and job interviews. Daniel started using my workshop on weekends, creating beautiful handcrafted cutting boards that Ryan and Chris helped him sell at the local farmers market. The college students adopted Frank as a surrogate grandfather, shoveling his driveway after snowstorms and helping digitize his collection of old photographs in exchange for his renowned apple pies and life advice. The Patel family invited several of us to their home to celebrate Diwali, beginning yet another tradition of cultural exchange and celebration. When December arrived, I realized my social calendar was fuller than it had been in years. My home, which I had once viewed primarily as a sanctuary from the pain of divorce, had transformed into a hub of community and connection. The rooms that had seemed too large and empty now regularly echoed with conversation and laughter. For Christmas, I received a special delivery, a handcrafted photo album from Nancy and Hank. Inside were dozens of candid photographs from Thanksgiving, capturing moments I hadn't even realized were being documented. Daniel and the twins constructing a turkey out of pine cones by candlelight, Frank teaching Jessica how to properly stoke a fire, the Patel family demonstrating their candle cooking technique to an attentive audience, me, head thrown back in laughter, surrounded by people who had been strangers just hours before. On the final page was a group photo someone had taken just before dessert, all 35 of us crowded together in the firelight. Beneath it, Nancy had written, "Family isn't always here born to, sometimes it's who you find when the lights go out." I placed the album on my coffee table, next to the framed photographs of my parents and biological family members. Together, they told the complete story of who I was and who I was becoming. When January brought another major snowstorm, I didn't hesitate to post in our group chat, inviting everyone to a snow day sanctuary at the estate. Within hours, my home was again filled with now familiar faces, each bringing food, games, or simply their presence to share. As I watched Ryan teaching the twins to make snow angels in the front yard, with Frank and Daniel debating the optimal hot chocolate recipe in the kitchen, I reflected on how thoroughly my perspective had shifted. The rejection that had initially felt so painful had led to a richness of connection I might never have discovered otherwise. The $2 million Vermont estate I had purchased as a solitary refuge had become something far more valuable, the heart of a community, a chosen family bound not by obligation, but by genuine care. The careful renovation I had overseen now seemed most worthwhile not for its aesthetic beauty, but for how it created space for others to feel welcome and at home. Sometimes the most meaningful traditions begin with a breakdown rather than a plan. Sometimes being excluded from one table leads to creating a bigger, more welcoming one of your own. And sometimes, when life closes a door or disinvites you from Thanksgiving, it's not the end of the story, but merely the beginning of a far more beautiful chapter. So if you're feeling excluded or rejected this holiday season, remember my story. Your own $2 million Vermont estate is optional. What matters is opening your heart to new possibilities and unexpected connections. They're out there waiting for you, perhaps just a power outage away from becoming your chosen family. Have you ever experienced a holiday disaster that turned into something wonderful? Or created your own found family traditions? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of turning life's disappointments into unexpected blessings. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember, sometimes the best family traditions are the ones we create ourselves.